So is there a way we can do well and do better? And I think I love that problem. I think it's a really hard problem to solve. I think that's why we all have jobs, right? Because if there were only easy problems, we would all just have AI do our work for us. But I think I like where I am. I like the problems I'm trying to solve, and I like I think I still have a lot to learn in this industry, and I think we all have a lot to learn in this industry, and I think there's a lot we can do to do better, and I'm excited to be part of that.
Alexis Hochleutner is what happens when Wall Street grit meets ad tech chaos and refuses to look away. She's cleaned up after the scandals, battled fraud rings in real time, and called out the industry's worst habits from inside the machine. Now she's done playing nice, and she's got the receipts to prove it.
Nobody does what we do. Multi-billion-dollar complex federal court litigation. We do it day in, day out. And we've built a team dedicated to doing nothing but keeping you safe in the most dangerous litigation in the world. We're comfortable, or everybody else is horribly uncomfortable.
And with the litigation piece, we bring the compliance piece, right? That's what I'm adding. That's what my entire team is adding. We've built TCPA World only for you folks to help you folks out.
It's like watching your host. Today we're talking to Alexis Hochleutner, who's tackled brand safety, ad fraud, and privacy at Google, Meta, Amazon, and T-Mobile. Basically, she's tried to fix the industry that loves breaking itself. So let's get real. Can ad tech be saved, or should we all just start selling kombucha? First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. So excited on this Monday to be talking with you about some of my favorite things, saving the world one ad at a time.
So let's start with the obvious. You left the chaos of equity investing after the 2008 financial crisis for the stability of ad tech? It's like jumping out of a burning building and landing in a dumpster fire. Walk me through that decision. Did you lose some sort of bet?
I wish. Yeah, I think, coming out of my MBA, it was 2008. Coming into my MBA, it was 2008, and I was working in equity investing, working for a real estate investment fund, and it was really exciting. I started in equity research. I loved digging up companies, figuring out what's working, what's not working. Should we invest in this company? Should we not invest in this company? It was really fun. I like the investigative reporting angle, so kind of love that about equity research. And then, coming out of my MBA, I got married on October 10th, 2008, to an equity trader. If you can remember, actually, I got married on October 11th. On October 10th, our rehearsal dinner was the banking crash. JP Morgan, Lehman Brothers, the run on the banks of 2008. So I was going to get my MBA anyways, went into the real estate program, but then realized kind of coming out of that I needed to both diversify for my partner and I, to diversify outside of equity investing. But also my dad was a business owner, an entrepreneur. And I always loved the idea of, part of liking digging into a company, figuring out what works and what doesn't. I'm a fixer and I like to fix things. And it's really hard from a financial standpoint to be able to go in and fix things. So I decided, it would be really cool to operate a business, to be on the operations side of the business. I joined a startup, everybody who was leaving Silicon, Silicon Alley was being created in around 2010 when I graduated, and I found a role at a startup called Meebo. I've never looked back, I guess. I've become an ad tech for lifer, but everyone was kind of looking for the analytical background. Hey, we have this new industry where we're buying and selling audiences, kind of similar to the stock market. So that's what landed me.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would take full credit for your meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Right. You said that ad tech seems safer than finance. What was the exact moment you realized that you were wrong?
This is such a good question. I think it's moments. I think my first really big moment in this industry of kind of chaos and one of the reasons why I got into this industry was okay, this is a new industry. No one's quite figured it out yet. like, let's all try and figure it out together. But the big moment that I realized I really didn't know what I was doing and had never experienced this before was when Meebo was acquired by Google and I was not acquired by Google. So had been working in business development for Meebo. I'm not sure if you have heard of it, but it was basically a chat aggregator who kind of created their own ad network with their own owned and operated inventory. So they were acquired by Google. I was not acquired by Google. They had already acquired folks from Wildfire and DoubleClick to kind of sell and market the programmatic side of the business. So that I ended up with a bunch of really smart, really awesome people without jobs and just a couple months severance. So that was the exciting first, like, okay, well, maybe this isn't as safe as I thought.
So you didn't work at Google, that's correct then?
No, I did. I was not acquired by Google, but I then found my way into Google after that. At one interview, I was told maybe with a little bit more experience under your belt, you would be a good candidate for Google. And I wanted to point them to the website where it said they favor ability over experience. But then a couple of months later, I found a really awesome role working for a really great manager who in the technical organization, like GTech, is what it's called. And we were helping with dynamic creative, like building out dynamic creative rich media strategies. And then that catapulted me into really understanding the product. And then my kind of the longest running role I had at Google was leading viewability, ad fraud, and brand safety for the DoubleClick platform. And that's just leading all the commercialization, the product strategy, and that sort of thing. Just product to market, market to product. What does the market want? Prioritizing what those market needs are and what product can build and when they can build it.
So based on your experience working at the big four of ad tech of Google, Meta, Amazon, and T-Mobile, if there were characters in the dysfunctional family sitcom, who is the clueless dad? Who is the rebellious teenager? And who's the weird uncle that shouldn't be left alone with the money?
Oh my gosh, I was going to say, I think like with Google, I think about, you know, how they say, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to do it right and at scale, go together. I think of if you want to move fast and break things and break a lot of things, even though Facebook took that out, you go with Facebook. They'll move real fast. They're going to break a lot of things, though. I don't know that they can just take that out of the name, but it's definitely, I would say, so the question was, so is that the uncle that you don't trust with the money? I think I trust Meta with money. I think they care a lot about that. So,
Well, not necessarily your money.
not necessarily my money. Well, probably they care a lot about people's money, but probably not as much about my privacy as maybe a Google would. There's just, and we talked about at Google, we talked about the relationship with the user between, you know, when a user is getting advertising based on their Gmail and the stuff that's in their Gmail, that feels a lot creepier than when you're on Facebook and you get, you know, an ad that's based on your Facebook usage. So we had a very different relationship with our user at Google, but at Google, it was like, you know, one of the product managers I worked with said something and I thought it was really nicely said. It was like, we're not going to do anything first. We're going to do everything at scale and together. So it was definitely a hard way to kind of like really move from a career perspective because everyone's super smart, super capable, and everyone wants to move together. So you're not doing anything really quickly.
So you had a front row seat to Cambridge Analytica's aftermath. What was the worst internal reaction that you saw? Was it more of a we're doomed or the stock price is fine?
So I think like, honestly, it was more of a mental kind of emotional thing, like working for, you know, a big company that had a breach of, you know, had a breach of trust. It was, you know, when I was working at Google on brand safety, there was a lot of PR nightmares that happened when sleeping giants would post on Twitter that they had found that some large brand had been monetizing terrorist content on YouTube. And
Right.
all of us stayed up all night at, you know, my husband said, I've never seen you work so hard. It's just because we cared, you know, we didn't want this to happen. We wanted to be able to prevent this in the future. So we were up all night, you know, on like these tiger teams trying to figure out how can we prevent this from ever happening again. And it takes a lot of toll on you, and it takes a big toll on you, especially even like the consultants who go and look at horrendous content every day. Like they're not doing great either. And so, then going to Meta and having Facebook at the time and, working on the reporting platform, it was kind of the Cambridge Analytica like aftermath was kind of just this big emergency that, again, just took a real toll, but there was nothing you could do to like retroactively have fixed that. Like there was nothing I could do to retroactively fix that. And so a lot of it was very painful for me personally that, there wasn't anything I could do to help besides apologize profusely.
So if you go back to 2008, knowing what you know now, would you still make the switch or would you just start a kombucha company?
This is a really good question. I think like I am one of those very strange people who thinks like I really think that the future of the digital world is so important. And I think, as much as finance and investing is important, it's different. It hits harder for me. Like it's very personal and I'm very passionate about like the digital future. I have children and I want them to feel safe. I think generally grandma is not like nobody really feels safe on the internet now today. You hear all these terms like, deep fakes and, misinformation and disinformation and CSAM to, pull from the headlines. Um, it's a dangerous world out there, and I feel like I can't go back because I need to help fix it for the future. And so, I joke like I'm saving the world one ad at a time, but I really do feel like part of what is funding the future of digital is ads, especially today. And so I want to be there and I want to help make it better because I think everybody's doing the best they can, but I think together we can do better. And I want to do better. So
you're on a mission to make advertising responsible, which sounds great, except this industry has the ethical backbone of a reality TV producer. So how do you make advertisers give a damn about fraud, privacy, and user experience when most of them just want cheap impressions and plausible deniability?
So I think that's when you say advertisers, I think it's so much more intricate than that. You have there's so many different stops along the way of, you put in an RFP and you say you want this type of media and you want this type of audience and this is the type of format that you want. And then, you send it to kind of the programmatic team and the programmatic team does what they can to actually give you what you're looking for. And some of the metrics that we use are just not perfect. And the problem is whenever we choose metrics, there has to be it's not exactly a science, it's somewhat of an art because as easy as it is to create these metrics is as easy as it is to defraud these metrics. So I think that's the core problem. I don't think it's advertisers. There is some aspect of advertisers saying, listen, I know that 20% of, or I don't know, like 2% of my budget is going to go to fraud and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'll just take it. I think like any sort of tolerance for fraud is not great, but there is some impossibility because I think to some extent you don't want bad actors to know exactly how you're like which inventory you're calling fraud. So there has to be some noise put into it. So you do kind of have to sometimes buy fraudulent inventory.
So are we in the thoughts and prayers stages of ad fraud?
So I don't think so. I think there are companies. So I think the biggest problem with ad fraud is that everybody's pointing fingers. We shouldn't be pointing fingers at each other. We should be pointing fingers at the bad actors. And there's a couple of things you can do to point fingers at the bad actors. And that's like, a lot of people are talking about know your customer, and putting those KYC elements into the supply chain of programmatic media. There's also things you can do to share information. One of the kind of memories I have of working. I worked at Google and then I worked at a company called Human, and it was called Whiteops at the time. And we had at Google, we had detected a fraudster, and Human had detected the same one in a slightly different way. And so being able to put together those two sides and get like more telemetry on what the bad actor was doing was really helpful in eventually taking down the bad actor. And then he actually had a second operation, ad fraud operation, that led them to kind of have to bring the FBI in and have him put behind bars. But really, I think that's like establishes this working together, and like fraudsters thrive in silos. So
Right.
I think being able to kind of create there's a lot of industry groups out there, and it's been really hard for us. I don't think anyone's really done it like perfectly, to be like the first one to kind of share information when it comes to fraud. And like somebody has to do it, because we got to have everyone's got to do it, and it's important to get those bad actors out, or else like they're running the show.
So I want to talk a little about supply path optimization. Advertisers have been screaming for transparency, but most seem too lazy to actually check their supply chains. How do we get them to care beyond yelling at the trade desk on LinkedIn?
So I think supply path optimization is very challenging to like. There's just so much data. Like if you looked at I don't know if anyone has used one of the engineers, amazing engineer I used to work with, has site called wellknown.dev, and he basically maps out the supply paths that are available using like bringing together ads.txt files and sellers JSON files and all the files that are kind of public files, saying like who's able to sell what inventory. And those supply paths, if you look up AOL, there's it's completely unimaginable how many different paths there are to get to AOL. And the data that you collect when an advertiser, when the trade desk goes out and has to measure all of these different supply paths, is astronomical. So I think one thing I know is like there is a willingness for the supply paths to we're never going to get the supply paths to be clean until people are actually looking at them. And so I think if advertisers and agencies demanded more transparency into the supply chain, I think they could do a lot of damage. It's just about, all of that data and how to kind of provide it in a way that's meaningful, and they can find, what are the right supply, like what are the supply paths they should be focused on.
Do you think agencies really want to know where their ads run?
100%. I don't think they ever want to be in a position like they were, when we were getting, when their brands were showing up in a terrorist YouTube channel. But that's the thing. I think like a lot of times it ends up being too late. And so if we can proactively put together, like there's all these new flavors of fraud or quality, like MFA and, all these different things, domain spoofing and that sort of thing, or bundling. But when you have an advertiser or an agency who's actually able to figure out how to use that metadata effectively, that's gonna be really powerful. But if they don't do it, then they're just having to like race. It's almost like a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like which keyword should I block today? So, or like which sites, because sites can easily change in a couple of seconds flat. We saw that at the Super Bowl with Kanye's ad. So I think we can't blame advertisers and we can't blame publishers. We're going to blame all of us, and we're going to work together to blame the bad actors and get the transparency that we need to get rid of them.
So if you could force brands to adopt one radical change in how they do media buying, what would it be?
This is a really good question. A radical change would be paying more for less.
Right.
So
you believe in premium inventory?
I do. I believe in premium inventory, but I think I also like paying, so the premium inventory is too cheap and lower quality inventory is too expensive. So can we create ways for, the kind of lower quality inventory to have more transparency, like, having definitions of MFA, like, well, what does we all tried to get together and figure out like what when I was at Human, what the definition of made for advertising sites or made for arbitrage sites looks like. And it's really like, no, everybody has a different opinion. And so being able to like demand radical transparency from your supply partners, and then also to think about, paying a little bit more for premium access and paying a little bit less for what might be perceived as lower quality.
So you worked at Google on app viewability and brand safety, which I assume is like being a lifeguard in a Shark Tank. But let's be honest, how broken is in-app advertising, and why is app loving allowed to exist?
So app advertising is really tough, where you have like a internet advertising where everything's based on a URL and you can somewhat see like what the code looks like, although you can hide some code in iframes and JavaScript code and redirects, but it gets even more complicated in app, based on, the SDKs and the packages that you're putting into to your app. And really like, there's when I was at Human, the F word, the word fraud, not the other one, it was a very loaded term. We had to see a smoking gun. We had to see the actual fraud taking place, the code behind it, who owned the code. We did a lot of research and tracing back to, who are the actors doing this and what were they actually doing, and getting like a clear smoking gun. Um, Basically, like, I don't know if AppLovin is, what code it belongs to AppLovin and whose problem and whose fault is it anyways. But I will say one thing: some of the things they've been talking about are that when I was at T-Mobile, we actually did a deal with AppLovin to have preloaded games on the phone, and
Right.
the preloaded games. In order to do that, there was a specific thing you had to do on the Google Play Store in order to get these games to actually appear. And a lot of developers have been using that. And I think maybe specifically AppLovin developers have been using that today to go beyond the App Store. Now, I don't know if, Google knows about that, or they, I would assume that they do. But that is like, there was a door that was opened for completely valid reasons. And now the question is like, we got to close the door. And why did this happen? So that's kind of what I think about AppLovin. I think there is a huge opportunity for AppLovin to, they have Adjust, which is like, they're basically going to be considered the currency in app. And there is a real need to close the loop between like what happens in your app, versus what happens on the internet. And that's actually really powerful for AppLovin to have that, and then MoPub, and then like the new video world, it's, opportunity to get into CTV and closing the loop there. I think that's a huge opportunity. I think they are going to need to focus more on transparency and fraud, because that's a big thing that still hasn't been solved. Like, I'll give you an example from a brand safety perspective. If you think about it, like, a lot of advertisers, will say, okay, like, I don't want to show up in front on terrorist YouTube content, right? But if you want to just buy, let's pretend like YouTube is an app, you're just buying YouTube as an app. There's no, and unless they send like an actual URL level of what each one of these pages are, there's not really a page level. So you're just basically buying run of YouTube because it's a social app and that's safe.
So if you had to bet your own money on a company that's actually doing app verification right, who would it be?
I mean, there are so many companies. I think app verification is just one piece of it. I've been working with a partner who I worked with while I was at Human as well in my organization with like uniting key stakeholders around a mission to make fraud and abuse unprofitable in digital advertising. And the two of us have gotten together, realized the benefits of sharing information and trying to rally the industry around it. And one of the things that I think, wait, I'm so sorry. What was your question? Hopefully you can back that out. What was the original question?
Is there an app verification company that's doing it right?
Got it. Okay, app verification. So, responsible advertising. So, like, app verification is just one piece of responsible advertising and just like responsible media in general. Ad verification is, from an advertiser perspective, was my ad seen in the place that I expected it to? Did I protect my brand and my budget? Right. But then there's the other side, which is the publisher. And that's mitigating risk in like real time. But then there's kind of the publisher side where it's like, are there like making sure that there's no faulty traffic right on the site and making sure that they maintain the quality of the site and quality management. And that's kind of like there's a whole realm that we think of like when we think about how do I advertise or what does responsible media look like. There's a whole slew of companies, and I think a lot of them are doing it right. But I think we're all pitting them against each other, and I don't know that that's necessarily the right way to do it, because the idea is we want to unblock. I'll give you an example. Like Double Verify and IAS work very closely with, an advertiser to be like, did I buy what I think I bought? And helping to keep agencies accountable and keep tech platforms accountable. But then you have a company like the Media Trust who is working on the other side, who's basically saying, how do we protect grandma?
Right. Yeah, I just edited Gavin's interview with me today.
Oh, okay. Well, right. And then I saw, also like Mario with Pier 39, like he's not verifying, he's creating, he's offering transparency from all these different partners to ensure that like advertisers are getting what they need to make the decisions on quality that they need. So I don't necessarily think anyone's doing it any better than anyone else, but I think there are really interesting platforms out there who are, since Sarah was just acquired by the Trade Desk, I thought, they had a really interesting capability and, humans doing a lot. Like they have a whole threat intel team, a lot of people, I guess like Analytics was saying like Double Verify and IAS didn't catch this, one particular ad fraud operation. And it's, that's not exactly what, that company is built to do. And I think Human does a really good job of researching. And same with Deep Sea IO. I think they have an awesome research team. And I love what Chris from Jounce Media is doing. And then if you think about also
Yeah, I heard that the list today is going to be public, their MFA list.
Oh, really? As part of
so you can check to see if you're on the list. So there's no question now.
Right. Actually, so the partner I'm working on responsible advertising with is Matt Katz, and he worked on that. So we were just talking about it. He came from Freewheel, and it's interesting because once you have that list, I talked about reverse engineering a little bit, like your kind of reverse engineering metrics. I mean, now you're a bad actor and you see your name on the, okay, well, these sites are on there and these sites aren't. How can I, how can I reverse engineer what they're doing to decide, who's on the list and who isn't? So it's definitely a game of cat and mouse, but I think it's a huge step forward to just kind of like share this and start the conversation, right?
So I want to talk about the privacy wars a little bit, especially IP tracking, because everyone freaked out when cookies started dying. But IP tracking is the real knife fight in privacy right now. So is this just a new way of tracking people without them noticing?
So when you say IP tracking, like being new, I mean, that's something they've always
It's not new. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that is really challenging for when you're looking at like bot or not, an invalid traffic, you have to look at the IP address, right? And you have to kind of say like, and you have to trace the IP address and you have to follow the IP address in order to get that. The IP is kind of like a level of information that, like getting it down to kind of the IP level is super important. And then you have what else? So Google
Isn't it just fairly cheap to buy IP blocks and just fake it?
I mean, actually, that's one of the biggest ways of finding fraud is it's very cheap to fake IPs, but it's also an easy way to catch people when they are faking IPs. So just the fact that you have to do it, So yes, like there were a couple of things that from a fraud perspective they were talking about, and now it's not actually. So there was like something called web environment integrity. This where basically Google was suggesting, some programmers were suggesting it from Google, and it was turned down because it was too DRMy, like digital rights management. But the idea was that, they were going to have some sort of validation of the IP address of the IP before it came, like basically just validate the IP and then just pass on like tokenized certification of that IP address so that you don't need to actually share the IP address to anybody. But then people were saying, well, why does Google get to control that? Google was considered, they suggested working with partners, but I think people saw it as Google being trying to, own digital rights management to the internet.
Do you think people actually care about privacy, or they just want to complain in theory while demanding hyper relevant ads?
I think there is some level of privacy that is really I don't like I think about whose data is it anyways. They said AppLovin stole Facebook meta like data. I don't know that it was metadata either, or Facebook metadata either. So I think users don't have an idea of where their data goes. And I don't know that we can teach grandma that where the data goes and like give them the transparency that they need. But like, I think the policies in place, and I think this goes back to know your customer, is okay. Like when I'm meeting when I'm meeting a partner for the first time, like what are their data ethics? Like, what are their policies when it comes to data? I think doing some due diligence there would go a long way, and then deciding, and then we use sellers JSON and ads.txt and validate supply chains to know that like you've only gone through these rigorous supply chain management where there aren't these intermediaries that are just coming in the middle and potentially stealing data.
I think I read that originally something 90% of app users or iPhone users originally opted out, but now it's around 25% when you include all the social networks and games and stuff.
I mean, that makes sense because there is a utility to sharing your data, right? Like you don't have to remember your login. There's tons of reasons why you would want to share your data, but you also have to feel safe, and it's nice. I mean, I guess like people feel safe with Apple that they can do that. It's a lot easier for Apple to do that because they're a closed ecosystem than somebody like Google. Even Facebook, I would imagine it would be easier to not hand their data over to lots of intermediaries.
So let's talk about the future. Every year someone swears that ad tech is doomed. Yet here we are, alive, well, and still finding new ways to overcomplicate the supply chain. But let's be real, retail media is taking over. AI is spitting out ad creatives at warp speed, and attention metrics are replacing clicks. So let's be really honest. Is digital advertising evolving, or are we just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic?
There's, anybody who claims that the internet is dead, that the open internet is going to die is, I think, crazy. There is such utility, and I guess I drank the Kool-Aid, but when you think about Google and trying to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, like I believe in that. I think that there is a need for it, and I think that we have grown so much, like our economy has grown so much from it, and I think the internet is here to stay, and I think that ads are a strong way of monetizing it and monetizing digital content, and I think we are evolving. I think like there is we have to admit that like some of the arbitrage that's happening is to make things maybe like to realize quality, to get a better grasp on quality, and to I think like in terms of if we think about misinformation and disinformation, I think we have a lot to do to make this better, and I don't think we should wait until the bad PR nightmare happens. I think we should preemptively say, okay, well, what should we do to prevent, X, Y, or Z happening on user generated content? So that's kind of where I think we're alive and breathing, and I think it's all up to us as like constituents and key stakeholders in this industry who care about the future of it it's in all of our best interest to not let the bad actors win.
So in 10 years, are we all still buying ads the same way, or will AI do everything while we watch Netflix, you think?
I think AI can do a lot. I think AI cannot add the human touch that is going to be required. Like, it's not just about that one ad, right? Selling a product. It's about building an engagement or an emotion with a user, and it hopefully positive, right? With the brand or the product. And so I think, we have a lot to do, but I think we can do it one ad at a time. But I think, in terms of AI, I think there's going to be a lot with great opportunity comes great responsibility, and I think we have to take responsibility that we can't just let AI run amok while we watch Netflix. We kind of have to focus on the important things, like the human pieces, the human element of trying to reach users who are also humans.
So is retail media just the same old ad tech, but with more groceries?
So I think, there's so many different there's so many different companies that have data that are now using them for advertising. And this is just this one. I think, like, Amazon, one of the benefits of Amazon is being able to really close the loop, especially for the endemic advertisers who are buying stuff on Amazon, who are selling stuff on Amazon. So they're able to really close the loop the way that maybe a Google could not close the loop. But I think it's limited. There are some limitations. I think there's also opportunity, because if you think about Google as a publisher, maybe there's publishers who might think of Google as a competitor, and so then you have these retail media networks who can then go to these publishers and create better deals, so that they don't have to go direct to Google, or they can find other avenues for success. So I think there's a huge opportunity there, just to diversify. But I think it's also hard if you think about, like, one advertiser going to, already I'm buying through the Trade Desk, I'm buying through Amazon DSP, I'm buying through Google DSP, and having all these different DSPs, retail media networks that you have to buy through. It's just making it more confusing.
So if you had to bet on one trend that would actually reshape digital media in the next 5 years, what is it? And be honest, so is this something real or just another buzzword?
So this being retail media networks?
Any trend.
Oh, okay. So sorry. Ask me the question again.
If you had to bet on one trend that you think will reshape digital media, what is it?
Well, I mean, the simplest answer is AI, right? I don't think it's a trend, but I definitely think that if you are working at a large company and if you have an idea for a project, you should definitely throw AI into the proposal, because that's definitely, like, where the funding is going, both internally and externally. But I think AI has a long way to go until it's really, like, innovating. I think right now it's really more about efficiency.
So I want to talk about my favorite part of the show, which is I get to strand you on a desert island. So you've already picked your hacker son, your sunshine daughter, your responsible teen, and your Tim the Toolman husband?
Yeah, Tim
and
the
your
Toolman
chill
Taylor.
brother. So is your husband actually named Tim?
No, his name is James, but he reinstalled our garbage disposal. So, like, he's not
I
a
did that too.
plumber.
I was like 40 something years old for the first time I did it.
Yeah, so
And it
I
leaked
feel like-
everywhere, and then I had to learn how to do it right. The hard part is keeping it up there while you turn it. You know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I don't, because he did it. He watched a YouTube.
He did all of it.
He watched a YouTube video, and like, when he was recounting his tales, I tried to listen, but it wasn't that interesting.
So why'd you choose those people? And who
Well,
gets
I
voted
mean-
off the island first?
I mean, my family is my, or mishpacha, like, this is my family. These are the folks that are, like, I don't know. I think given that my son has had a lot of challenges with public school, it's like, when you have children, I feel like you finally just realize that, like, I don't know, I didn't realize how strong I could be, because you have to advocate for these children like they are your own, like, flesh and blood, because they are. And the fact that I was able to advocate for them and what they need, I really understand. I can empathize with them, and I know them very well. And if I was going to have to be stranded on a desert island, I'd want to be stranded with the people who know me the best and who I know the best and I know have the best heart. So That's why I chose it. If I was going to have to live out my life, I'd rather live out my life with like the people I love.
So let's add a couple ad tech industry people to the mix. If you could take only one CEO from ad tech who's actually useful for survival, and I'm not actually sure that exists, who is it?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, am I going to say Mark Zuckerberg? I
Is
don't
he an ad
know.
tech? Is he an ad tech CEO?
Is
I guess
he
so.
ad tech? I don't know. I mean, because I wouldn't want to be stranded on a desert island with him just to like hang, because I don't know that like we have a lot in common, except actually he grew up
I
in
just
my
don't know
hometown.
if he's useful for survival unless you want to eat him.
Well, I think he knows the right people. I would say the same thing about Elon Musk.
Would you rather be stuck with a DSP sales rep or a LinkedIn thought leader?
Oh, for
And that's a
sure.
hard choice. They both equally terrifying.
I mean, I think this is like self-hating because like I'm trying to start like a consulting business while I'm looking for my next thing. So I kind of feel like I'm a LinkedIn thought leader. So it's a little bit hateful that I like self-hating, but I would say a DSP salesperson because they're more interesting, right? Like I've never been a DSP salesperson, although I've gotten kind of close, but more on the creative side. So probably that.
So who in ad tech would actually help you survive? Are we talking to someone from Google, or do you bring a fraud detection expert to optimize your food supply?
It's a very good question. Okay, but I have an engineering leader in mind, and I just think like he he took like he created the first like video ad, and I just
All
feel
right.
like he would be able to like
Was it
have just
Flash? What was it?
I don't know exactly. Like I don't want to speak about like if he doesn't want to be known for this, but like he 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 basically, he hacked into like his parents like computer, and he'd been like a hacker and spent his whole life kind of like building cool stuff. I feel like he could get me out of it with the right tools. I guess I'd say the same thing about my son. In terms of ad tech leaders, like I think a lot of being an ad tech leader is about knowing the right people and messaging. And I'm not sure if you're stranded on a desert island that's really useful, but I could be wrong.
So if you had to build an entire new digital ad industry from scratch on the island, what is the one thing you do differently, and we just ran programmatic?
Just ran programmatic on a desert island. I would, there's so many things. I guess I would just, I would require very specific policies on my desert island for user generated content. Um, require very specific policies for user generated content and a clear understanding of how the algorithm is working. Like that's like as like a threat sharing to the government.
So inclusion or exclusion lists,
What about those?
which is better?
They're both blunt objects. Neither.
So we talked about fraud, privacy, and surviving the desert island. Let's talk a little bit about you beyond the jargon, the algorithms, the eternal LinkedIn debates. Who are you? Well, there's a question here, I'm sure. I'm sorry. Next page. It's like, where's the question? You started equity investing, dreamed of saving lives through medical research, and somehow ended up in the digital ad world. Do you ever think about what could have been?
Yeah, I think I would have been more emotionally stable. But I have to say, like, I thrive in one of the reasons why I didn't go into medical research was, oh my gosh, like, it's so much pressure having to save lives every day. So I joke about saving the world one ad at a time. But, I think there's like almost like an anxiety of like, we're not saving the world here in ads, right? So is there a way we can do well and do better? And I think like I love that problem. I think it's a really hard problem to solve. I think like that's why we all have jobs, right? Because if there were only easy problems, we would all just have AI do our work for us. But I think like I like where I am. I like the problems I'm trying to solve, and I like the you know I think I still have a lot to learn in this industry, and I think we all have a lot to learn in this industry, and I think there's a lot we can do to do better, and I'm excited to be part of that.
If we asked your kids what you do, what would they say?
This is such a good question because they were very upset when I left Google. I was like, why? Because you like love the androids that I give you? Like, they're like, remember when you
So
worked
you,
at
you get the little
Google?
toys and everything.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
little,
Like,
yeah.
I guess because they're Gen Z or whatever, they're not into Facebook. Because then I went to Facebook and they didn't really care. So I
What's
don't think
what's
they've known. Right. I don't think they've known since. I mean, and then when I worked at Amazon, they had some understanding of what I do. But
so if you
actually,
like moved over if you moved over to Roblox, they'd be in high heaven.
right, exactly. But I would say my son knows a little bit of what I did at Human because, there were some really awesome threat investigators and threat researchers that, were helping me as like my son's a hacker. We talked about like, how there are the black hats and the white hats. Like, how do we make him like to be a little bit more PC about it? I don't know what they should change the name, but how do we get him to be like a good actor and not a bad actor? I also had a situation where we were given a device that then got taken off of Amazon, and he snuck it to school, and school it's called the flipper, and he snuck it to school, and like the school is still
Oh, they're
investigating
talking
it.
about the controller, right?
Yep, you can
Yes, I know what
control
you're talking about. Yeah.
anything. So then they sent it to the police to my local police department, and it's still being investigated. So my
Yeah,
son knows
I
a
was
little
a
bit about
I get that. I was a hacker in middle school and high school. It's actually how I got sort of forced into law enforcement.
it. Really?
Yeah, but we used to hack all the radio signals. Like we go to like the drive-ins because it was based on radio signals, and we would get our radio out and we pretend to be on the other end of the drive-in too. All sorts of things. We do post office, we'd hack PBXs and stuff in the time. But yeah, I
Right.
get it. It's fun to figure out what you can do.
And also, I mean, my son is the next generation hacker. Like he probably is going to know more than the threat researchers now. So I think like getting insight from these new, like, what are we calling them, that they're Gen Alpha, like, they're it's just comes so natural to them. Like we could learn a lot from them.
So all the other companies you worked for, Google, Meta, Amazon, T-Mobile, what is the most insane corporate moment you've ever witnessed that when you sat back and thought this meeting could actually be a reality show?
I have a lot of like interesting stories about the Amazon culture because it's so unique. Like,
Right.
and there's a lot of kind of like fiefdoms, I would say. So, I was in an organization with a lot of Googlers, and at Google, you're creating presentations, but at Amazon, you're basically writing docs. And if you're the first person to write the doc, and you have a doc read, and you're not allowed to include any pictures, like no photos whatsoever, no illustrations, no analysis, no data, like no graphs, nothing. It has to be straight words. And you put like together this, how you think it should be, just like words only. This is like my strategy. This is the strategy that I want to move forward with. You get approval from you do doc raids with all the important internal stakeholders. And once you've done that, you're like, you wrote the book on whatever the strategy is, and you get to kind of be the first and you get to run that strategy. So I think that's like a really interesting, like, kind of culture, and would be an interesting reality show about how people act in that space and in that environment. It's just interesting. But I would say Facebook had a similar, like, if you think about Facebook as like a social platform, and how like the algorithm shows you like more of what you want to see, so is Facebook Workplace. So if you go into Facebook Workplace and you look up Facebook dogs, you get shown a lot of Facebook dogs and not the stuff you really like, the groups you need to be involved in. It's like it's also its own kind of interesting reality show in that, like, everything is based on a social media platform.
So, in your mission to fix the industry, is there part of you that likes the chaos, or is it just a little bit like Stockholm syndrome at this point?
I thrive in chaos. I like solving hard problems. I like I like the idea of using, like, I like the idea that past performance is not indicative of future results, like taking from my equity background and saying, okay, like, can we create something completely new? Is there a way that we can look at this differently? And I hope I still maintain that, having already been in this industry for since 2010. I hope I can still continue that and continue to think differently, because I think that keeps me excited.
So what's the wildest, most unpopular opinion about the industry that if anyone knew about, it would get you banned from LinkedIn, and we won't tell anyone about it? Is it that half the people in the space have no idea what they're doing?
And I would include myself in that half. So I don't know. I think we all don't know what we're doing, but like, I think admitting it is half the battle. And then also like relying on others. I think one of the biggest problems I would say, like, I think we could do I think we could do a lot better, and we're not. We're just like, I think you and I spoke about like how the trade desk had kind of that new audience capability that was almost like curation, and
Right.
there's something having to do with like, oh, now they're even monetizing like the audiences you aren't buying. You know, I think there's a level of like, okay, like, are we solving stuff just to like, are we just trying to solve stuff because we can make money, or are we solving stuff that will make this industry better and for like the long term? And I think that's one thing that I think everyone's focused on, like this near term, like that one ad and that one, RFI, or that one, campaign. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's about like longevity. I'll say we can do better. We can think more longer term. And we can do that by thinking more longer term and working together.
So if you could have one superpower beyond your current ability to save the world one ad at a time, what would it be? And don't say time travel unless you plan to actually bet in sports.
Well, okay. Yes, sure, betting in sports would be great. But I think like seeing the future, not necessarily to make money from it, but I think of it more as like, my children's future. And like, I forget who said it, but someone said, if we don't fix social media, it will be our biggest regret for our children's future. And like, I think, and I mentioned a lot about how, we're always being reactive in this industry about brand safety and fraud. And like, I would say, like, is there a way to be more prepared for the future, if I could see into the future a little bit and say, well, okay, like, what does the future of AI look like, and what will be some of the challenges? I would I would really appreciate that for the sake of my children's future.
So let's fast forward 5 years. What is your dream scenario? What has changed? And more importantly, are you still in the game, or have you retired to that desert island?
So I don't think unfortunately, I'm old, but I'm not old enough to have retired. I think right now the industry's in a tough spot. There are people who are working their butts off trying to just last a couple more years. And I think there's a lot of organizations, like companies, are just kind of trying to get every last drop from, the people that remain. There's a lot of layoffs happening. I think like that kind of like, there's like everybody in the tech industry is a have not. And I'm hoping in like, some of them have a job, but they don't have a life. And some of them, don't have a job. And so I think there has to be some sort of balance there. And I think that comes to like everybody just doing better. Like, okay, like how much is too much? How much is making too much money off this crappy inventory? Like, so I think, having a balance of like quality and is going to be super important in 5 years from now. If like, I'd like to be, helping to build businesses and build good businesses in ad tech and be like, oh, remember all those crappy things we used to do? Like, do you have to deal with brand safety? Like now we have like more interesting problems to solve because like we're all working more closely together. So that's what I hope for.
So final question, do you think we actually had a productive conversation, or was this just one long excuse to roast the industry?
I hope I didn't roast the industry, because I think I said this at the beginning. I don't like, there's for sure some love hate with this industry. Like, I hate that like we're still talking about brand safety, and then that we're still talking about like cookie bombing, and we're still talking about like all of this and like data privacy and all this stuff. But at the same time, I love that we're all like looking to solve these for new solutions to these problems, and that AI is coming down the pipe, and there might be some additional like opportunities for us. But I do think like we can talk up the wazoo about this, like you and me. I think you and I are probably like two of the people who really care and want and think that we should do better, but I think it has to be everybody. And I think if people like hear this and feel somewhat like they want to do better, and that there's like they want to join the forces of like let's do well, but let's also do better, I think that would be a successful conversation that you and I had.
So now the hardest part is where we force everyone to dance.
Okay. Are you going to play music, or do I just have to like do like
A massive thank you to Alexis Hochleutner, who didn't just lend us her insights. She cracked open the ad tech engine, pointed to the leaking oil, and asked why the hell we're still pretending it's roadworthy. Her career isn't just a resume, it's a map of where the bodies are buried, and a blueprint for what rebuilding could actually look like if anyone had the guts to try. And none of this would be possible without the support of our brilliant sponsors. Troutman Amin LLP, the legal powerhouse keeping the industry honest, armed with sharper arguments than most DSPs have targeting logic. Whether it's privacy, compliance, or navigating the murky waters of media liability, they don't just know the rules, they help rewrite them. Incremental, because in a world drowning in vanity metrics, they're the rare partner that actually gives a damn about real outcomes. Not vibes, not dashboards, results. If you're tired of pretending that a 0.01% click-through rate is worth celebrating, these are your people. Thanks for reading, thanks for thinking. And as always, stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.